Hey, how's it going? This is Joe, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Wharfedale Diamond 11.1s and the ELAC Uni-Fi UB5s. This speaker shootout is a crazy one because these two speakers are some of the craziest bookshelf speakers I've tested within this price range. Both of these speakers can be had for under $500 for a pair. Now sometimes they'll go on sale. Full disclosure, the ELAC Uni-Fi UB5s are the speakers that I've had for a while, so it's what I use in my home. I have a Dolby Atmos setup, and I use the ELAC UB5s and the UC5 as my front stage. As always, this is going to be a very thorough review, and if you don't have time to watch the entire thing, I'm going to break it down like this. Both are really good speakers. Both are awesome speakers. And if you're curious why I say that about most of the speakers that I review, it's because if something's not good, then I just don't take the time to review it. So almost everything that I take the time to make a review about is going to be good. These are beyond that. Both of them are very good, if not bordering on excellent. So in my previous review of the ELAC F5.2s versus the Wharfedale Crystal 4.3s, the Wharfedales came out on top for me. That might have been a surprise to some people who know that I am a fan of ELAC products. With this review, I think ELAC has done enough to even the score. The Wharfedales are beautifully designed. They have a great overall sound signature, and they sound smooth. They sound enjoyable. Anybody who owned them would not complain about them. There are certain things that it does better than the ELACs. For example, it has a downward facing port, which means that you can put them near a wall and they're not gonna be affected as much as the ELACs are. Where the ELACs have an advantage is even though they don't have a box that curves to the back, that means for about the same size, they have more volume, which means that they can play a little bit deeper. So the bass response on the ELACs is a little bit better than the Wharfedales. What's special about this is that it's using a concentric design. So this is actually a three-way design instead of a two-way design. So instead of having a woofer and a tweeter on the Wharfedales, it has a dedicated woofer, a mid-range driver, and a concentric tweeter. That three-way design requires a more complex crossover network, which means that it's more costly to build. Somehow they were able to do it at this price point, and it really shows. You get better bass, better mid-range, and clear highs. The imaging on them, because it's concentric, is amazing. The only speaker that I know that has a similar setup are the KEF R300s, and right now they sell for $12.99. In the end, it's gonna really come down to personal preference. I personally like the sound of the ELACs better. They're some of my favorite speakers that ELAC makes, although I haven't tried some of their newer speakers like the Adante and their upcoming Argo Navis, but as of right now, the ELAC UB5s are definitely my favorite speakers to date. So these Wharfedale 11.1s are a successor to the previous generation, the Wharfedale Diamond, the Wharfedale Diamond 220s, and before that, the Wharfedale Diamond 10 series. Okay, let's just take a second and have a look at the speaker. Look at how beautiful it is. The curved enclosure, the gloss finish on the front, the rings around the drivers, and even the drivers themselves. From the woofer to the tweeter, all just a beautiful design. So this is a ported enclosure, and you may be wondering where the port is. As I mentioned earlier, the port on this is downward facing, and it fires down into this base. It might be a little bit hard to see, but you might get an idea from looking at this here. This is using a 5-inch woven Kevlar driver. Now this is not a real phase plug like we saw on the Fluence that I reviewed. It's also using a 1-inch textile dome tweeter. The recommended power is 25 watts to 100 watts, and it has a sensitivity of 87 dB. On the back, you'll find vertically mounted 5-way binding posts. One thing to note on the woofer is that it's not using a rubber surround. They're using a foam surround, which is something that's not typical nowadays. Wharfedale says that that enhances the sound over typical rubber surrounds. I think it may contribute to some of the smoothness that you hear. It does come with a magnetic grill, which I prefer not to use, but with two kids, grills are on. What can I say? I am very impressed with these Wharfedales. I wish more people in the US knew about these speakers because I think they're a great value. I forgot to mention the frequency response. So they claim 55 Hertz to 20,000 Hertz. So let's take a look at the measurement from these Wharfedale 11.1s here in my room. So keep in mind that this is not in an anechoic chamber, so my measurements aren't perfect, but gives you a general idea. Okay, so now to the ELAC UB5s. The ELACs are using a 5¼ inch aluminum bass driver. Unlike the Wharfedales, this uses a rubber surround. And then where things get real special is in the concentric design. So this has a dedicated 4-inch mid-range driver and a tweeter that's mounted in the middle. That's what they call concentric. I also see the term coaxial thrown around, but that might be a little bit different. It's like what you see with car speakers where you see the woofer and then you see the tweeter, but it's not inside and it's not time aligned. These are. What that does is it really helps with imaging and soundstage. You can have two of these set up and it sounds as if there's a center speaker there. Also, because there's a dedicated mid-range driver, mid-range is very smooth on this. You'll notice the vocals really benefit from this too. And because the bass driver doesn't have to do what the mid-range is already doing, now it can really focus on those bass notes. And this thing for this size really digs pretty deep. In my test, this actually performs better than what ELAC claims. ELAC claims a frequency response of 46 Hz all the way up to 25 kilohertz. In my test, they actually dig deeper than that. And I can confirm that because in most of my listening areas, these hit some crazy lows that you wouldn't expect to hear from some bookshelf speakers. And that's why I find it fascinating. I've seen some people say that the UB5s don't have enough bass, and I don't understand what they're talking about. In almost all of my listening areas, and I have a few of them, there's enough bass in these speakers where I would say that you may not need a sub, unless you're using it for home theater, in which case you always need a sub. The recommended wattage is from 40 watts to 140 watts. The sensitivity is lower than the Wharfedale's at 85 dB. Where it might get tricky is that this is a 4 ohm nominal impedance, whereas the Wharfedale's are 8 ohm, which means that they'll work on pretty much any amp. With these, you have to make sure that your amplifier can handle 4 ohms. Most Class D amps will have no problem with that, but just make sure. Most of the amps that I have ran the UB5s just fine. These also have a magnetic grill, and with them off, I think that they look pretty nice too. The rings around the speakers are a nice touch, and it gives it that signature ELAC look. And the vinyl on here is a little bit different in that it's not a wood grain finish. It feels more like you're touching a record. It has like grooves to it. Not a bad design choice, just a little bit different. If you want something a little bit more premium, ELAC does make a slim version, and they come in either a satin black or satin white painted finish. Those are more expensive though. On the back, you'll find a bass port and a really nice custom 5-way binding post. These are some of the nicest binding posts I've seen on any speaker in this price range. Overall, I love the sound of the UB5s. I mean, these are the speakers that really made me a fan of ELAC. Their presentation is just awesome for all types of music. The bass response, as I said earlier, is just ridiculous for speakers in this price range and in this form factor. It's funny because ELAC also makes the Debut and the Debut 2.0s, which are less expensive than the Uni-Fi UB5s. If I were to compare the Uni-Fi UB5s to the Debuts, I feel like the sound signature is more different than comparing the Uni-Fi UB5s to Andrew Jones's previous design from Pioneer, the Pioneer SPBS22 LRs. To me, those two speakers have that similar sound signature where they're laid back, they're forgiving, you can play all different types of music, and they sound much larger than they appear. I think generally speaking, most people would agree that the Wharfedales are nicer to look at. They have a fancier cabinet construction. They look more expensive. They're also less sensitive to placement near walls because of that downward firing port. They're more efficient at 87 dB compared to 85 dB, and they run at 8 ohms, which means that it won't be as picky when it comes to an amplifier as the ELAC UB5s. I think that some people might find their sound signature to be a little bit more lively, a little bit more enjoyable than the UB5s. They're refined and they sound very detailed. You can tell that from the frequency response charts that has a rising top end. So as usual, we have some sound demos. Take a listen and let me know what you guys think.
shadow drew again. You sit alone, alone. All the silence knows your name. Elaine, Elaine, Elaine. Things round you are nice and plain and full of you, Elaine. But you are full of pain.
In my last video, I released the sound demos for these two speakers, and I didn't say which speakers they were. I asked viewers to comment on which one they like better and why. So these are the results. And here are some of the comments as to why somebody liked the Wharfedales better. And here are some of the reasons why people like the ELACs better. So here are my notes from the listening test from the Wharfedales. And my notes from listening to the ELAC UB5s. I've created two new categories, one for best bookshelf speaker and another one for best tower, because as some people have mentioned, it's not really fair to compare a bookshelf speaker to a tower speaker. Let's see where they place. All right, so for best bookshelf speakers, where do these place? Let's see, we have Fluon's AI40, Pioneer SPBS22 LRs, Fluon signature bookshelf speakers. These are gonna be up here, placed really high. But we still have the ELAC UB5s. ELACs are at the very top. So for desktop use, I assume that you can use either of these for desktop, but I think there are some better options. Of course, the Cantos are powered, the Vanutus are powered, the Daytons are even powered. I would have to put these, now I'm gonna put these, the Wharfedale Diamond here, maybe a little bit higher, right here, under the Canto U6s, and the ELAC UB5s are actually a little bit below this just because they are rear ported, and so they're not as forgiving. Usually at a desk, you may have a desk near a wall, and the Diamond 11.1's downward facing port are gonna help with that. All right, so as far as value, both of these are under $500. And so the Wharfedale 11.1s, man, compared to the Wharfedale Crystal 4.3s, those are towers. It just is gonna depend on what you can fit, I guess. The Wharfedales are still, let's see here. The Wharfedale 4.3s sometimes go on sale for $400. So I would say that they were right up here, right barely underneath, right? Because if you can fit the towers, then the towers are gonna have more bass than the Diamond 11.1s. Although the sound is maybe slightly less refined than the Diamond 11.1. So they're really close. I have to move this slightly, just like that. And then where do the UB5s fit in here? Under 500 bucks, gotta be on top. And finally, for best overall, on the top we have the Wharfedale Crystal 4.3s and the ELAC 5.2s. Diamond 11.1s better than the Wharfedale Crystal 4.3s. The 4.3s have more bass, but these look better. They sound a little bit more refined. I'm gonna have to put them even. Those are gonna have to be even. That's a rough one. And where do the ELAC UB5s place? Better than the Crystal 4.3s. They're concentric design. They're smaller, but you need a better amp. I have to put it slightly higher. ELAC UB5s are current champions. There they are. Overall, I can't not recommend either of these speakers, but I think it's one for one. When it comes to the towers, I think the Wharfedales took it with their Crystal 4.3s, but when it comes to the bookshelves, I think ELAC has it with these UB5s. So there you have it. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. As I've said before, I do have a Patreon. If you're interested in listening to my podcast, I'll leave a link below. So as always, I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to leave a comment, like, subscribe, ring the bell. You know what to do. Anyway, take care. Bye-bye.